Welcome to Business Analytics course. This is Dr. Aruna, Associate Professor from MBA Department, MLR Institute of Technology. In today's session, we are going to explore data using pivot tables. Now, what we are going to study in this today's class. So, what is pivot table? What are the key uses of pivot table? Advantages of pivot table, disadvantages of pivot table, the key components of pivot table and steps to create a pivot table. Now, if you look at this picture, this is one diagram which is representing the pivot table. We are going to explore in a couple of minutes. Now, moving forward, so pivot table, what is the definition? What exactly is the pivot table? It is an efficient tool in Excel for summarizing, analyzing and organizing the large data sets. So it enables us to group, filter or perform different types of calculations like sums, average, maximum, minimum, whatever the calculations we need, that we are able to do it with the help of pivot table. In a pivot table, we simply have a flexible drag and drop interface which helps us to transform the raw data into actionable insights or meaningful conclusions or meaningful formulas. Whatever the data we are having, that we can summarize it into valuable insights. So the drag and drop interface is one very good option where anyone can easily get the meaningful data from the Excel table. Now, looking forward, now if you can see this figure, see this is the area where we have drag and drop interface. So here we are having filters, access, values, legends, etc. that we are going to explore in a couple of minutes. Now, going forward, so what are the key uses of pivot table? So if you can see, the first one is summarizing the data. So any data, whatever the data we are having, the aggregate of numerical data, for this we are going to calculate the total sales by a region, average or total marks of the students, like anything. So quickly we can aggregate the numerical data and summarize it. The second one is data analysis. So we can see or we can identify what are the different trends, patterns and what exactly means, say for example, what are the top performing regions for sales, like that we can do the analysis part. So data analysis can be done. The third key feature of pivot table is restructuring data. So we can swap between rows and columns. So simply we can say the pivot. We can view the data in different perspectives in the way we want. The fourth one is filtering and sorting. So here we focus on specific data subsets and we will be using filtering, sorting or different ways we can use it for filtering and sorting the data. And the last one is creating interactive reports. So we can build or we can construct dynamic summaries that can be refreshed. So whenever some source of data we are using it, so whenever the data is changed, automatically it is going to reflect on the dashboards. So we generally use it for creating interactive reports. So what are the key uses means? One is summarizing the data, second one is data analysis, third one is restructuring the data, fourth one is filtering and sorting, and fifth one is creating interactive reports. Now going forward, so what are the advantages? So advantages, very well, the first and the foremost one is it saves time. So saves time in analyzing the data. It is very easy to modify and update any kind of data, helps in decision making, and we don't require any kind of formulas here. So the four major advantages while using pivot table is no complex formulas are required. It is very helpful in decision making. We can modify it, we can update it, and it also saves time for analyzing the data. Then the disadvantages. So there are certain disadvantages, but the problem here is It requires clean and structured data. Suppose any rows or any information in rows or any information in columns is missing. So it cannot, the pivot table cannot give us the correct data or accurate data. In such cases, the major disadvantage is the data should be very much clean and structured form. And the second disadvantage is limited customization compared to advanced tools. So there are certain advanced tools which give us the data, means which give us the result or output in the way we want. But here, though it is pivot table gives us the way we want for the analysis part, but still there is a limited customization when compared to customized or advanced tools. Now, complexity for beginners. Now, why is this complexity for beginners means? Sometimes the beginners may not understand whether to put the data in the row or whether to put the data in the columns. So at certain times, times what happens is when the data is kept in different positions, like instead of putting it in the columns and if it is kept in the rows, and instead of keeping it in the rows, if we are keeping in the columns, the beginners will be getting a different kind of output. So there arises some kind of complexity. Now, the fourth disadvantage is manual updates. So whenever we are entering the new data or whenever we are adding the new data, the data does not always automatically refresh, means it does not get updated. So sometimes manual updates have to be performed. And performance issues with large data sets. Suppose if the data is too large, sometimes it may also crash the Excel. So these are a few disadvantages with respect to pivot table. Now, let us see what are the key components of a pivot table. As I was discussing a couple of minutes back in the first slide, we are having drag and drop interface. So in respect to that, we are having the four key components. One is rows, columns, then values and filters. Now, if we look into these things into depth, if we deep dive into the depth, like in rows, so the rows define how data is grouped vertically. Okay, for example, listing the departments or listing the student names or product categories down the side. So for this, we would be using the rows. Now, it is useful for breaking the data into categories for comparison purpose. Now, if you look at the columns, so this defines how the data is to be grouped horizontally. For example, to show the semesters, to show the year-wise results, or to show the regions across the top. So we would be using the column values, or we would be using the columns. So this particular component helps to compare categories side by side. So this is useful. Rows are useful for comparison, and whereas columns are used for side by side comparison, or you can compare categories side by side. Now, the next one is values, which forms the core of the pivot table. This is the core part of the pivot table where the numerical data is summarized. Okay, here we can perform sum, we can perform average, whether we want count, maximum, minimum or percentage, whatever the calculations we require, that we are going to make use of it in the values section, that is values component of the pivot table. And finally, the filters. So here the filters, we are applying the conditions. So allows selective viewing of the data by applying conditions. So we want to filter the data by using specific semester, specific department or specific data range. We can use it in the pivot table. So where do we use exactly these filters, or what is the usage of these filters? This filters helps to drill down the subsets of data without altering the table structure. That is the main advantage of filters in the pivot table. So here we are simply using the conditions. So based on the conditions, whatever the subsets are there, that data is going to drill down without altering the entire table structure. So the next is about steps to create a pivot table in Excel. Now let us see what are the steps to create. So whatever the data you are having, or that data we are going to select it. So click on the insert tab in Excel. So when you click on the insert tab, the pivot table option is there, that if we can click, we can just simply create a table. Simply we need to choose the place where the table has to be created, and then simply drag the fields into the 4 components which we have discussed earlier, that is either in rows, columns, values and filters. And that is how we can get the pivot table, or how we can create a pivot table in Excel. Now let us explore the same in Excel. We have in front of us the data, which consists of date, product, region, name, unit, sales and cost of goods sold, some information. So we are having almost some 60 records here. Now from this, we want to create a pivot table which resembles something in this fashion. Say for example, name in the column. So on the left hand side, we are having the name, and horizontal wise, we are having the regions, that is east, west, north and south. Now let us see how we can prepare a pivot table based on this 60 records information. Now simply, as we have discussed earlier, click on the insert tab. So here we can see the insert tab. Click here. So when we click here the insert tab, so the first option itself here, it is pivot table. So please remember, whenever we are selecting this pivot table, our cursor should be somewhere in the table. So in the data. Okay. So somewhere we are supposed to keep the data. We can keep in the beginning of this table, or somewhere here, anywhere in the within the table. And now click insert tab, and here click on the pivot table. So once the pivot table is clicked, so we are going to witness create pivot table dialog box. Now in this already, since if you can observe, so here there are the dancing lines. So the entire data has been selected, and we can see the table range. Now it is asking us, do you want the pivot table report? Where do you want the pivot table report to be placed? Okay, so we want, say for example, we want it in the same existing worksheet, where we don't want in the new workbook or new worksheet. So we are going to choose the second option, that is existing worksheet. Once this is checked, or once this is clicked or selected, now simply we are supposed to give the location where exactly we want. So click on the arrow here. So when we click on the arrow here, so simply we are going to use, so somewhere data here we want it, right? And then click OK. So if you can observe, see, this is the place where we are going to get the pivot table, and here we got the pivot table fields. Now for your clear understanding, now if you can see here we have drag fields between areas below. So we have discussed earlier, there are 4 key components like rows, columns, values and filters. So these are the 4 key components. Simply this forms the drag and drop interface for pivot table in Excel. Now here if we observe, see here we want the name in the first column. So and we want the what you can say region wise sales in the column wise. Okay, simply bring the data here, say names in the rows. Now if you can observe, see, when I have just dragged the name into the rows, so we can see here the row labels. Here I got the names. Again, if I can show you here, now see, I have just dragged this name category or this name column into the rows. Now on this, if I can see the regions east, west, north, south, I want it column wise. So simply drag the region into the columns. Now if you can see here, now see, can you see here? Yes. The row labels we are having here names, and the column labels we are having the region wise data and also the grand total. Now we want so we got the overall structure. Now we want to know how exactly, means how the salespersons have done the sales with respect to different regions. So simply, so we are having the sales option. See, the sales label or the sales field, simply bring that into the values. Bring that into the values. Now once that is done, you can see here, yes, this is the data which we get it in a finished form, or simply the data according to, means the salespersons who have done sales. Say for example, if we take Harry has not done any sales in the eastern region, whereas he has done in the north, south and west. And here we also find what is the grand total with respect to all the regions with and of different salespersons. And we can also find out from this data which salesperson has done the maximum sales. And it is clearly evident from the table that Nick has done the overall grand sales with 11,500, contributing to the highest sales in the southern region. So in this way, we can get the entire data in a structured form or in the way we require. Now let us see one more example. Let us explore one more example like this. To the same data, say for example, I am switching over to the same data here. In this also, I am having the same data, but somewhat in a different style, I require the data. Say for example, I want the region wise like this. Say in the region wise east west, so that on the left hand side, earlier we were having from left to right, that is east, west, north and south, but now I want it in a column wise. And according to the region, what were the sales done by the different salespersons, the total sales. I am not interested in region wise, but total sales done by each sales representative. So for this, again we are going to go for insert a pivot table. Simply click on any place in the table, data table. Click on the insert option. Click on the pivot table. Here, so again it is asking us, okay, it has already selected the data. Now it is asking where we want to place the pivot table. So here I want it in the same existing worksheet. So if you want, we can also go it in the new worksheet. So here in the existing worksheet, I want the data to be placed somewhere here at N2, and now click OK. Now again, here we can find a dialog box that is pivot tables field, and here we got a pivot table. So again, if we can see here region wise, we want it in the left hand side, that is column wise. So simply I am dragging this region into columns. Region into rows, and then I am bringing the columns into name into columns. Okay, let me show you very clearly. So I am going back. See, here we want east, west, north and south, the directions, that is regions on the left hand side. So simply I am selecting the region and dragging it into the rows, and the names of the persons into the columns, and I want the total. Okay, total, sum of the total. Now if we can see here, now I am having in a different scenario, like I am having here Harry, John, Joseph, Nita, Nick, and here I am having region wise. What is the grand total region wise? Earlier we were having the data sales representative wise, but now here we are having the data region wise, and who has done the highest sales and what is the total, grand total. Now here we also have one more option here. like we want it region wise and also the names wise. Now simply I am just dragging here into this column. Now if you can see region wise I have done it. Region wise, what are the sales representatives who have done region wise, and what are the sales? Some of the sales is nothing but the total sales, which they have done it in the 4 regions, that is east, west, north and south. So for example, here in the east, the total sales were 8,459, of which John has done 10,010, Joseph 345, Neeta 1156, like that and so on. So in this way we can get the total for region wise and with respect to the sales representative. So this is one kind of data using the pivot table. So whatever the fashion we require, we can do it. And so we are also having not only the sum of the sales, as we have discussed, we can also do averages, we can also do the count, we can also get the maximum, minimum, all these things. So let us look how we can do this one. Now for this data, now keep the cursor anywhere within the data, click on the insert tab. So once we get it, click on the pivot table. So the pivot table, already the data has been selected. You can see here the table range has been selected, and the lines we can see there, the moving lines, dancing lines. And here the existing worksheet I want it to be placed, the output or the pivot table. So I am selecting this radio button. Now click on this because I need to give the address. So I am giving somewhere here O2 and click this one and click OK. Now here, so what do we want? We want the region wise. We want what are the count of the salespersons. Very simple. The same simply drag and drop interface where we can just drag and drop it, and so that we can get the data in the way we want. So the region, we are going to bring it to the rows. And next we want the names, or we want the salespersons count of sales. Simply drag it in the values. Okay, just look at the screen. See, here we got sales, I mean some of the sales, and here we got region wise, that is east, north, south and west. But exactly we are not interested in the sum of the sales. Instead we are interested in the count of the sales. Now for this, again just a small interesting part where you need to find out is in the values section. For example, just I'm moving forward here. Under this values category or the values component, there is a drop down arrow. Just click here. When you click here, under this dialog box, that is some of the sales here, we are having value field settings. When you click on this value field settings, a dialog box opens with value field settings. Now under this we are having some count, average, maximum, minimum, product, all these things. We are having count of numbers, standard deviation of the population, variance. So there are certain things, variance of the population and all. Now here we are interested to know what is the count region wise. So we are going to select the count option and then click OK. So once this is done, you can observe the change. See the count of sales. Can you observe the difference? See the count of sales 13, 14, 16 and 17. Yes, the same we have obtained here, 13, 14, 16 and 17. So the grand total is 60. Earlier we have observed the sum of the sales, but now we are observing the count of the sales. Now to this count of the sales, we also want a minimum, we also want a maximum or something like that. Now simply again we are going to the same option. So just select one more time the sales and bring it to the values. Now we want the count as well as the maximum. So simply click on sum of the sales, click on value field settings, Now, when the dialog box of value field settings opens, just drop down, and here we are going to get the maximum function. When you drill down, you are going to observe the maximum function. Click on OK. And now if you can observe, see, we have got 1345.56. This is the maximum sales in the eastern region. 4564, this is the maximum sales in the northern region. 8110, which is in the southern region, the highest or the maximum sales. And 1234.89, this is the maximum sales which is observed in the western region. Now if we can see here, these values have been rounded up. 1345.56, which is equivalent to 1346, and 4564, obviously it is a round figure, 4564. 8110.56, which is rounded off to 8111, and 1234.89, this is 1235. This is how we can use the pivot table in the way we want. So the pivot table helps us to analyze, organize, summarize the data in the way we want. Of course, there are certain advantages and also there are certain disadvantages. Now, coming back, in today's session, we have seen in the what exactly is the pivot table. What are the key uses of pivot table? So pivot table is a table which is used in Excel and which helps us to analyze, organize and summarize the data. We are having a beautiful interface in Excel, that is drag and drop interface, which helps us to get the data into the meaningful insights. So there are certain key uses of pivot table like creative interface. Now pivoting means we can either change the rows into columns and columns into rows. We can summarize the data. We can get a large amount of data into the meaningful insights. All these advantages are there. And when there are advantages, there are certainly some disadvantages. So it is sometimes a little confusing for the beginners, because they should understand what data should be kept in the columns category and what data should be placed in the rows category. So there little confusion comes. Once the concept is known to them, then they can easily do it. So that is one certain disadvantage. The second one is when large amount of data is there, sometimes Excel may crash, and whenever the new data is added, sometimes it may not get updated. So we need to do the data updation using manually. So there are certain disadvantages. And the key components, if we look into the pivot table, we are having 4 key components. One is rows, the other one is columns, the third one is the central core part, which is the values, and the fourth one is the filters. And the last one is what are the steps to create a pivot table. In the Excel, on the Excel ribbon, we are having the insert tab. So when we click on the insert tab, we see the first option as pivot table. Just click on the pivot table, and wherever you want to place the data, you need to select that particular place, and then we can create the table. Simply drag the options, whatever the options we need it accordingly, into the rows, columns, filters and values. So in that way we can get the pivot table in the desired form we require. So we have already seen all these things in the Excel. So thank you so much. Stay tuned, and we shall meet with some more new interesting concepts in the forthcoming session. Thank you.